So our next speaker, here's the thing about our last two speakers. They have wonderful countenances. That's hard to say a little bit. Their faces make me happy. And the first to speak to us this morning is Kent Annan. He's the author of Slow Kingdom Coming. That is really recent, May of 16. Aftershock in 2011 and Following Jesus Through the Eye of the Needle in 2009. He's co-director of Haiti Partners, a nonprofit focused on education in Haiti. He's on the board of Equitas Group, a philanthropic foundation focused on ending child exploitation in Haiti and in Southeast Asia. He's a graduate of Princeton Theological Seminary, his M.Div, and Palm Beach Atlantic University. Teaches adult education in his local church and speaks regularly around the country. His wife Shelly and they together live in Florida with their daughter and son. This guy's been all over the world. When you read his bio, you read the things that he's done, it's really stunning, and I'm sure you're going to hear some of that. But this book, Slow Kingdom Coming, has been a blessing to me. That's what I love about these speakers and authors. It's the same story, but from this other perspective, where you go, I hadn't seen it in that way, and it just
2,000 years ago,
strengthens
Jesus prayed,
what we're doing. So let's welcome to the stage our next speaker, Kent Annan.
On earth as it is in heaven. Thy kingdom come, but a family huddles in fear as bombs rip through concrete and flesh nearby. Thy kingdom come, but another innocent young black man is assaulted as though guilty. Thy kingdom come, but still hadn't come this morning when a child skipped school to walk 3 miles to get water that will make her sick. Thy kingdom come. Today someone gave everything at his job to provide for his family. It still wasn't enough. Thy kingdom come. But it's hard to avoid compassion fatigue with all the needs we see. This is a slow kingdom coming. But slow kingdom coming is a hope, because we have faith that God's kingdom is both here and still coming, that the arc of the universe is bending toward justice. Slow kingdom coming is a commitment, but how do you stay committed in the face of your own limits? How do you commit when it's so hard to make a difference sometimes? We need practices that both shape our spiritual lives and change the way we help others, so we can be freed into doing justice, loving mercy, and walking humbly in the world.
All right, good morning. It's so good to be with you this morning. It's really an honor to be here. I've loved being at Apprentice after hearing about it for a long time. It's been rich in hearing speakers and meeting you all in seminars. Just a wonderful time. As I was getting ready to be here with you, I was thinking about my daughter who just turned 11. We just went past her birthday, so I was reflecting on memories of her. And then I was also thinking, this is October. We've arrived in October 1st, and every store I go into seems to want me to buy either candy or pumpkins or toy witches as Halloween approaches. And then also, this is, I think, my first visit to Kansas ever. And so I hope you Kansans will forgive me, but it also got me thinking about, yes, the Wizard of Oz. But it's a cute Wizard of Oz story, so I hope you'll let me tell it. So 5 years ago, I read The Wizard of Oz to my daughter. It's a great book to read with your kids, and I read it, and it was just fantastic reading it to her. And we got to the end of the book, and it was coming up towards October, finished the book, and then watched the movie together, had fun watching the movie, and a couple days later, my wife took my daughter to Target, and they're running some errands. They went around a corner, and there at eye level was a shelf of shoes, and not just any shoes, but girls' shoes, and not just any girls' shoes, but ruby red, sparkly shoes. And a costume was born, and we had the cutest little Dorothy ever for that Halloween. My wife found a blue and white check dress for her. So we had her, and Halloween arrived. And in Florida, when Halloween arrives, it's great because we're able to finally say summer is over. And we live in this neighborhood where the houses are really close together, and a lot of retired people live there and a lot of young families. So at Halloween, we're grateful to see each other, come out of the air conditioning, and a lot of people set up, there's like a table and sit out in the front yard or in the driveway and give out candy as people come around. And so, and Halloween is popular because of that. Our neighborhood is popular at Halloween. My wife keeps track, and I think last year we had 321 trick-or-treaters come by our house. So this is 5 years ago, and we were still kind of getting used to how many people came. I went around the block with Dorothy and with my then 2-year-old son, who was a cute little cow at the time. We went around, we finished trick-or-treating, came back, and we're giving out candy. And again, so many people are coming. We had a couple of friends over, and finally we get to that point where we've given out all our candy. The last piece of candy goes, and we hadn't bought enough, even though we thought we'd bought too much. And there's that moment of panic then, because that's just when the teenagers are coming. And so at that point, it's time to hurry up, gather everything, run inside, lock the door, turn out all the lights, and pretend you're not home, lest they try to teach you about generosity later with eggs and toilet paper on your house. So we're in that panic, gathering things up, ready to hustle inside. And as we do that, a group of teenagers comes around, 12, 13, 14-year-olds come down the block. And I'm thinking about what speech am I going to give to try to help them not be disappointed that we don't give them candy. As I'm doing that, little Dorothy in her red shoes dashes past me just into the front yard where she had deposited her bounty of trick-or-treating. She grabs a handful of her own candy and dashes back out and puts a piece of her candy into each of these trick-or-treaters' bags. And we stayed out there for another half an hour at her insistence so that she could keep on giving out her candy to these people who were coming around the block. It was this beautiful glimpse, I think, of something of this wisdom of kingdom living, the joy of kingdom living, that it's fun to receive and it's great. But how much better even out of our own bounty to then give, and how much more meaning we find in that. So I'm blessed, and it felt like the ground turned a little bit holy beneath our feet as my daughter taught me about the kingdom. But then what happens is we grow up, and we realize we don't have enough to fill all the needs that keep coming our way in our neighborhoods, on our Facebook feeds, the charity appeals in our mailboxes, the appeals that come that are heartrending in our inboxes, the latest on the nightly news, these heartbreaking stories. We can't respond to them. There's too many. And in these moments, sometimes I feel like what I wish I could do is click my heels together 3 times. Say, there's no place like home. There's no place like home. There's no place like home. Or as the psalmist might have put it, how long, O Lord? How long, O Lord? How long, O Lord? But this is the home we've been given. This is where God has us right now. And we're not transported to some idyllic Kansas. We're here in the real Kansas, or the real Oregon, or the real Florida, wherever we are. And this is the gift. This is the challenge, but also the gift. How do we live now in our home, in our country, in our world, faithfully, with kingdom living and with kingdom loving? 2,000 years ago, Jesus prayed, "Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven." Thy kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. And 2,000 years later, as we saw in that video, 2,000 years later, we see the image of a Syrian refugee boy pulled from the waters because his family didn't make it safely, escaping the horrors. 2,000 years later, another young black man is killed, though he's innocent, and then another, and then another. 2,000 years later, one of our loved ones is diagnosed with cancer. This is a slow kingdom coming. In that phrase, slow kingdom coming, I've found that there's reason to lament, a freedom to lament. Too many people suffer too much for too long. We heard Sung Chan Ra speak powerfully about our need and what we can find in biblical prophetic lament. But in this phrase, slow kingdom coming, as I acknowledge lament, I also find I'm taken into hope, the hope that brings us all together here for these 3 days. We believe the kingdom is coming, and not just in the future, but right now in our midst, transforming our lives, giving us hope. We see this in our neighborhoods, in our communities, in our churches. The kingdom is coming. This is our hope. And if it's our hope, then it also needs to be our commitment. The slow kingdom coming is our commitment. How do we commit to participating in this slow kingdom coming? And what are these spiritual practices that can help us sustain it for the long term so we can live wisely and love wisely too? I've learned a lot about this living into God's kingdom coming by living and working in Haiti for the last 13 years. 13 years ago, my wife and I got on a plane. We actually went to Toronto to visit my parents. They lived there at the time. It was January. They drove us to the airport. We took off our winter jackets in the car, figuring we wouldn't need them, hustled in. Within 24 hours, we were living out in the countryside in Haiti in a little tin-roofed house, no running water, no electricity. The door between our room and the next room almost shut all the way with this Haitian farming family that we lived with for the next 7 months. And they didn't speak any English, and we didn't speak any Creole. And it was a way to enter in with respect and love for them so that we could learn to serve for the long term. So we lived with them for 7 months, and we moved to Port-au-Prince and lived there for 2 years, working on education with churches and schools. And then for the last 10 years, I've continued to work in Haiti, going back and forth from Florida, where we live. A lot of the work we've done is helping churches engage for children's rights. So about 200,000 children in Haiti are in a way trafficked away from their homes to live with other families where they're exploited as labor and often abused in horrible ways. And so we work to help the church engage with these communities and to protect the most vulnerable in what's already a vulnerable society. So that's the work I've been doing, and as I've thought about this slow kingdom coming and learned so much from Haiti and working in our church in Florida, there's a story in the Bible, a story of healing that's become especially meaningful for me. One day Jesus is out walking with his friends, his disciples, and they come into the town of Bethsaida. When they arrive there, I'm sure what they're really wanting to do is find some water and sit in some shade. But instead, pretty quickly, a group of people come up from the town, and they've heard about Jesus, and they bring their friend, a blind man, and bring him up and ask Jesus if he can heal him. They bring him there, and Jesus doesn't do anything right away. Jesus takes his hand, and they start walking to the edge of town, step by step, holding hands, Jesus guiding him, leading him on the way, nothing really happening quite yet. And then they get to the edge of the town, and Jesus puts spit on his eyes, and then puts his hands on his eyes and takes him away. He says, "Can you see now?" And the blind man says, "Kind of. I can see a little, but things are kind of blurry. People, they kind of look like trees." And so Jesus puts his hands back on his eyes and takes them away. And how about now? Yes, now I can see clearly. What I love about this story of healing is that it's a story of gradual healing. And I don't know about you, but often the kind of healing we experience in this slow kingdom coming is gradual healing, not instant healing. It's walking to the edge, holding Jesus' hand. It's seeing blurry, and then it's seeing clearly. If that blind man were anything like me, he might wake up again blind the next day and need Jesus to do the process all over again so I can see again. The story of gradual healing. And in this gradual healing, I think we're led towards the importance of what's happening at this conference. Because we need the wisdom of kingdom living that lasts for a long time and can participate in this kingdom coming. And I love the talk that Kyle did and the dialogue Jim and Kyle did on Thursday night, where these goals of kingdom living need to match with the means of kingdom living. And so what does that mean for us? Well, in this work of the kingdom coming and work for the justice, I think, that kingdom living demands of us, it means we need to be guided by two loves, these two loves that we know need to guide our lives, the love of God and love of our neighbor. And so for love of God, we have this stream of wisdom that we draw from that's represented so well here. This stream of what Jim is doing in Apprentice, of Richard Foster and Dallas Willard, that loving God means we need to have disciplines in our lives and practices in ways that we're rigorous to be open to this grace that transforms us and leads us into it. That this stream we need to continually draw on for our love of God. Then there's also this other stream, and because I've been in ministry and missions for all of my adult life, there's this other stream of how do we love our neighbor well? And this is another stream that we really need to draw on to help shape us, because we've learned to become more cognizant in recent years with books like Toxic Charity and When Helping Hurts, that good intentions aren't enough. That just wanting to do justice in God's kingdom isn't simple. It isn't easy. It demands more of us. It demands that we draw on the stream of wisdom. And as we do this, then we can be shaped to love our neighbors well. And that's part of what we're invited into in this slow kingdom coming. And then for me, in this project that I've written about for the last few years and been talking about, we did in the seminars yesterday, is I think when it really gets to be powerful for the work of justice is when we let these two streams, the stream of loving God and the stream of loving our neighbor, come together and become this river of justice that flows down like rushing waters, the prophet Amos might say. So how do we do this? How do we tap into these two loves and help them nourish each other, not that they stay these two different parts of our lives? Well, I suggest that there are 5 practices that can help us do this. We aren't able to go into all of them now, but I want to touch on a few of these practices that show how this wisdom of kingdom loving our God can also connect with the wisdom of kingdom loving our neighbor. So one practice that I found really helpful is a practice of confession. And the practice of confession isn't something that's often talked about, I think, in the work of justice. Often the metaphors we use in talking about justice are metaphors like reaching down to give someone a hand up, or it's helping someone who's drowning and saving them. But what I've found is or there's the proverb that many of us know of, give a man a fish, he eats for a day, teach a man to fish, he eats for his lifetime. But in that too, we're sort of the teacher, and this person with the fish or getting a fishing pole is sitting down below us. But I don't think in all my experience of working for justice that that's the right posture. Rather, the right posture is confession. That I've always found that the posture when I'm down on my knees in confession before God, before my neighbors, I confess, you know what? I have a lot of privilege in my life. I have a passport. My skin keeps me safer sometimes. I'm able to read and write. I have a family who provided the basics for me. I get enough calories today. I have privileges in my life. And when I confess this, what I find is my vision gets a little clearer. I'm able to see my neighbor a little better. I'm able to engage in the work of justice a little more deeply. If I confess that I like to feel good when I give, that's good. I think God created us to feel good when we give. But if I confess that sometimes is my driving concern, then I'm freed from that and say, you know what, that shouldn't be what's the driving concern. The driving concern is how can I best love my neighbor who's in a tough situation, or that family in church, or how can we best design the program that's helping single mothers in our church. Or I confess it's not most important that I feel good, but that we help well. Or I confess that I get compassion fatigue. Sometimes I just can't take it anymore. I want to bury my head in the sand because I can't take one more appeal letter. I get numb, I find, or I get paralyzed because the systems are so full. I think some of you are pastors in a church, and I think sometimes you would be able to confess, there are probably 5 or 10 people in your church, and you could give 95% of your time to them and never fulfill all their needs. we need to confess our compassion fatigue. And I find when we do that, God finds ways to renew us, replenish us, and help us to see a little bit better how to work for justice. So the practice of confession is this one where we can have this spiritual practice with God that helps us to do better the work of justice and helps us to sustain it for the long term. Another practice is a practice of respect. The practice of respect, I've found what this is really getting more deeply into Jesus telling us we need to love our neighbor as ourselves. If we rush too quickly into loving our neighbor as ourselves, then we're going to really love our neighbor the way we want to love them, not the way that they can best be loved. And I've learned a lot about loving our neighbor as ourselves, about practicing respect through spiritual practices. So when I was in seminary, I learned the practice of Lectio Divina, reading scripture aloud, slowly, meditatively, together in a small group. And I know some of you have been doing this the last few days here, and I had an experience much like you did, Jim, when you talked about leaving seminary and the farmer in your church. You said Thursday night. So I learned Lectio Divina. I'd been in this lovely seminary in Princeton, went down to Haiti and did Lectio Divina with some of the Haitian colleagues there, and they said, we need to start teaching this. And since then, we've taught it to tens of thousands of people in Haiti. But we did this in Haiti, and I got down, knew this, and thought, I'm the teacher, I'm going to bring this to them. We're in this little church, packed dirt floor, sitting in a circle with illiterate farmers and market women and people living on the edge of survival. And it became so clear so quickly that I was the apprentice in that room. I was the one that was learning from them how to love God. I was the one learning from them about Scripture. And I didn't just learn that about loving God and loving Scripture from them, but I learned about justice and how to do justice well. Because as we did Lectio Divina together, I saw the importance of having each person's voice heard. And voices that wouldn't always be heard. The woman in a patriarchal society, she needs to be heard if we're going to work for justice. And I learned about how we get insights into doing this kind of work well, because the illiterate farmer has so much wisdom, but if Scripture isn't read aloud and done in this way, he's not going to be able to participate. But when it's done in the right way, he can fully participate, and his wisdom comes to bear in changing and developing his community. I learned about the importance of partnering, that we sit together, working together, being shaped by God, and sitting together with the Trinity, seeking for the Trinity to shape our lives and how we can partner together to work for justice in the community. And I think this practice of respect applies too for some of you. I know from talking with you yesterday, or working in prison ministries, or working with a new Syrian refugee family that's coming. How do we deeply practice respect so we listen, our imaginations are shaped by other people? So that's the second practice we'll touch on now. And a third practice that I talk about is a practice of truthing. And truthing is not a word that I made up, and it's not a word that Stephen Colbert made up, and it's the opposite of truthiness. But truthing is, in fact, a scientific term that I learned about a few years ago. And it's this great term where someone like a geologist, they take an image of like a ground that they're studying, then they don't think they have the full picture until they actually walk on that ground. So then they have the map, the aerial image, and then they get out and they walk on the ground, going around to see how that maps up, the best thinking and the theory matches up with the reality on the ground. And that's the practice of truthing. So I learned this early on when I first was working with refugees. I was living in Europe and worked with a refugee ministry in Athens for a while, and a friend named Scott. There was something special about his work and his ministry and how he did things. I found out one of the things he did, he knew the best theory. He was learning what everybody said was the best thing to do. But then 2 different times, he went out for a week and lived with the refugees he was serving, many coming out from North Africa. So in the winter, he went out without a jacket, and he slept on the subway grates for warmth like they did. He only took $5 bus fare to get home. And he lived with them, and he learned how hard it was to get showers and what they had and what they didn't have. So he learned how to serve people well, but he also had his love for them enter into the marrow of his bones. And whatever ministry we're in, there are ways that we can do this kind of truthing and letting the truth of people's experience and really seeking for our love to be guided by truth. It's not just our intentions that guide our love or what we think, but that we keep on doing this. And I think that's part of the freedom we have. We know that when helping hurts, but we don't want to be paralyzed by that. We want to be freed into this rigor of love that is guided by truth, and that's what this practice of truthing is. I was learning about this practice of truthing, and as I learned about it, I decided to go out with a scientist who actually does it. So in the middle of Florida, running down the middle of South Florida, is this big swamp called the Everglades. And for decades, they've been doing this renewal project on the Everglades that costs billions of dollars, and they're working on that. And this scientist is one of the key scientists who is studying how grass is growing in the Everglades, because it might make a difference of whether this is successful or not successful. And so in this project, he takes these aerial images of where grass is growing, but then he actually has to lean out over a boat to look at the leaves of grass to see if it's a good grass or a bad grass that's growing. That's how detailed we need to be in our work for justice, of seeking the truth so our love is guided by truth. So I decided to go out with him and do some truthing for a day. So I went, met him in the Everglades, walked to the end of a dock. At the end of the dock is this crazy Back to the Future looking contraption with a big fan and tubes all over, and it's one of these airboats. And got in one of these airboats with him and strapped in and put earmuffs on, and off we go, and we're shooting down these kind of back canals. And as we're going down these back canals deeper and deeper into the swamp, going by these 10-foot alligators that are like slowly slipping into the water as we go by. And I thought, I've seen this movie. It never ends well. And so I spent the day out there truthing with him to learn about how truthing can apply in your ministries and in my ministries in what we're doing. And just wanted to share like my reflections then at the end of this day of truthing. When he was done, the very last check of this process of truthing, we put our earplugs back in and he fired up the airboat. But we only moved forward a few feet. He tried again, we were stuck. He got out, the grass was thick and the water was shallow. He trampled it down, we tried again. I got out and trampled with him. I didn't say what I was thinking, that this seemed too thick for an alligator. And I was glad that he had said earlier that the pythons in the Everglades hadn't been seen this far north yet. Everything was quiet. After a few minutes, the frogs restarted their grunting and the birds came out from hiding and started singing. We could then better see the complexity because we were taking time on the ground. A reminder as we practice truthing that our presence can affect what we see around us. Finally, he cranked the fan all the way up while I stood on the grass and pushed the side of the boat. It started moving. I pushed along and sloshed through grass and water and then jumped in. We were off again. Truthing involves getting stuck, coming to our wits' end in the ministries that we do, needing to help each other out. Truthing leads us to be persistent but patient. It's a practice that asks us to push into complexity, seek clarity, and yet accept ambiguity. We receive failure as grace. We pray, we evaluate, we discover new ways to help each other. We work by faith and by sight. Jesus said the truth will set you free. David Foster Wallace wrote in his novel Infinite Jest, the truth will set you free, but not until it is finished with you. Indeed, we don't want truth to be finished with us. We want our lives to be shaped by truth, though the process is not always gentle or pleasant. We practice truthing because we want to be good stewards as we work for transformation of the world with our neighbors. We practice truthing because whatever we follow is what we're transformed by, and so we want to follow truth and follow the one who is truth, who is life. That's the hope we have in this wisdom of kingdom loving and kingdom living. That we don't have to try to click our heels together 3 times, even though we long deeply for that kingdom to come fully. We're here now, and in the here and now, as we serve God's kingdom, working for justice, the ground turns holy sometimes, like it did for me on Halloween 5 years ago. Another time when I was in Haiti when we first moved there. I'd been there for about a year and a half, and went to do an educational seminar out near the city of Gonaive. And the city of Gonaive had just experienced a really horrible flooding. Floodwaters had rushed down, and over 1,000 people had died in this flood because of all the deforestation in the hills. So we were there doing an educational seminar nearby, but there was nothing we could do to help people in Gonaive. Supplies couldn't get in or out. They were really stuck and stranded in the midst of this flood. So we did the educational seminar, then we were getting a bus to go back into Port-au-Prince. It was a volatile time. We were feeling anxious, wanting to get back in before dark because it was kind of violent and dangerous in the city then. Waiting for a bus, and eventually one comes by. It probably served as a food delivery truck or something in its previous life in the U.S. Now it was a passenger truck in Haiti, 2 narrow benches down either side and like a rail, like a crowded subway car in the middle, and crammed in with 60 or 70 of my newest friends in there to this jostling truck. I got a little slice of wood bench that I was sitting on up in the front third. If I moved my left foot too much to the side, a chicken let me know that was her territory by giving me a little peck on the ankle. And we started bouncing towards Port-au-Prince. And there's always, people don't have smartphones, so there's actually conversation on public transportation in Haiti. And we're bouncing along towards Port-au-Prince, and as we do, conversation turns to Gonaive, the city nearby, and this flooding. And people say how horrible it is, and people can't get in and can't get out. We're talking for a little while about this. I'm the only American there, it's all Haitians. As we bounce along, then this young man standing there holding onto the rail says, "I'm from Gonaive. I just got out." We looking closely in that crowd, and he was dirty, and you could tell something was different. He was a little bit jittery. So people started asking him, what happened? How is it? And he started to explain about the water rushing in to sweep the living away to join the dead, and about his sisters and mom were still there, and he'd come out to try to get to Port-au-Prince where he has family to get some things back in for them. Just this horrible story of what was happening as we're bouncing along. And then he says, look at these clothes. I've been wearing these since the flood. That was a week ago. As he said that, someone up in that part of the bus kind of reached into a bag and reached out and handed him a shirt. And some of these market women who are out all day in the sun selling things from their gardens to try to make maybe $2 in a day to try to provide for their family. These market women say, "Oh, take off your shirt, put on the new one. You need to put the new shirt on." So he takes off his shirt and puts on the new shirt. And then as he is doing that, you see kind of just another hand in the middle of this crowd, and someone hands up a pair of shorts, and someone else a bar of soap, and someone else a comb, and pretty soon this young man has a whole supply full of things from these people who have almost nothing, giving to this man who has nothing. As that happens, then 2 of these market women living on the edge of survival get up, and I see one of them kind of reach into the fold of her skirt where they keep their money, and she takes out maybe a 25 good note, maybe 60 or 70 cents, a good part of her wages for the day. And she starts going around squeezing through the crowd saying, "Just give 5 goods, 10 goods, 50 goods, whatever you can. We need to help them." She goes around, and suddenly this bouncing bus I was on became Jesus' parable of the widow's mite, and the ground turned holy as we bounced together, a little slice of God's kingdom. She goes around, collects money, and everybody gives, and she comes back with this handful of bills and coins, and she gets it, and another woman gets a little plastic bag and puts it together. They wrap it up, and they hand it to this young man. He's still standing there. He's overwhelmed. He starts to say, "Mpakone kisam kadi." I don't know. I don't even know what I can say. And he starts to cry, just overwhelmed by the generosity, knowing how much these gifts cost everybody there. And as he says that, one of these market women says, No, you don't have to say anything. And you don't have to cry. We're all Gonaivians now. Friends, we're all people of God's kingdom now. And that burden is heavy. But that burden is light too, as we're invited in to love people towards justice and mercy and walking humbly with God and with our neighbors. And as we do that, we get to pray the prayer that Jesus taught us. But we also get to be part of the answer to the prayer that Jesus taught us. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. Amen. Amen. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you for your book. Thank you for your life. Thank you for your ministry. The story about your daughter is so touching. And as I was listening to that, I thought, you know, when Jesus said, it is more blessed to give than to receive, he wasn't just sort of, that's not a pious platitude. It actually really is.
Right. Yeah.
You know?
Exactly.
I mean, that's the thing. And we're dealing with truth. And you know, wisdom is learning how to live well, and that requires truth. And so you hear a story like that.
Yeah.
So are you like the most awesome parent in the world? I mean, that your daughter...
My wife isn't here, right? Yes. Yes.
There you go. So I have to mention this. One of the things I loved in your book was you talk about the Rublev Trinity. For those of you who don't know, or maybe I'm blocking. Back up a little bit or move that forward. Don't want to block the Trinity. So Andrei Rublev painted this icon in 14th century, I think. It
14,
goes way
15th,
back, yeah. And it's a very famous icon of the Trinity. And you're actually not supposed to paint anybody but God, but Jesus in iconography, because he took on human flesh, so the Spirit and the Father. But so he took this story in Genesis 18 where the angels visit Abraham. And so he's doing a play on that. So they look sort of like angels, but they're actually also representative of the Trinity. Talk about what this symbol means to you, what this icon means.
Yeah, so I'd first discovered it when I was in Romania, and it was actually on this little $3 watch I'd found back 20 years ago in Romania, and it just struck me, and I thought I'd discovered this amazing image of God, and then I realized it had been well kept for centuries and really valuable in Christian traditions. And what it's meant to me is, as I've gone in this work in Haiti, but also looked at other ministries all over the world and in the U.S., is it's hard to partner well. And so I talked about this icon in the practice of partnering, which I didn't have a chance to touch on in the talk. And what I love about the icon is we're invited in. So these three persons of the Trinity here, but then the fourth spot is the place where we're viewing it from and where we're invited in. And so I think that's really beautiful devotionally, personally, if we're praying using the icon to pray. But then I think of it in terms of justice and God's kingdom and think, well, I'm not just invited by myself. I'm invited together with the people I'm working with, together with my church, together with the community in Haiti that we're working with, together with these children who are being abused and neglected. And in that, then I get this image of, partnering isn't me going to save someone who doesn't have agency. This is me and someone else who's created in God's image, and we get to be around this table together, almost an electio divina of justice. And so this icon is meant that
it's
to
so
me.
beautiful. And also, if you look at the images, the Father's on that side, to your audience's left, Jesus in the middle. There's a lot to this icon if you study iconography, what's going on with the colors and the posture. But I love how their heads are tilted toward one another. In a sense, the Spirit and the Son toward the Father, but even the Father. And I love that about the early church fathers used the word perichoresis to describe the Trinity, which is a word that means mutual submission. And what's really cool, it also means to dance. Isn't that cool? Where's Natasha? Anyway, I mean, it's so beautiful to think of the Trinity living in that way. And I once heard Dallas someone asked him if there was any hierarchy within the Trinity, and he said no. And he didn't do a theological answer. He said, no, there's no hierarchy in the Trinity because the members of the Trinity wouldn't stand for it. And I love that. And so it's a symbol of that. And what I loved about your talk was the way in which you took a posture, and you even talked about the posture of confession. There's this sense of submission in your tone that I really appreciate in the way you talk about justice. Let me say, okay, a few years back, I was teaching a course on formation for mission, and we read Brian McLaren's book, Everything Must Change.
Yep.
My son Jacob, who's in the back, was in the class. My son Jacob, he's a quiet student. He's not one that likes to dominate. And so we were about halfway through the book, and he just raised his hand, and I said, yes, and he goes, I have a problem with the title of this book. I said, why? He goes, everything must change? He goes, that's overwhelming. It's too much. I mean, what Brian's pointing out in the book, point by point, you're going, yeah, that needs to change. Yeah. But it's that compassion fatigue. It's that, what can I do? If everything must change, I'm overwhelmed. Yeah. Speak to us about that, because that's, I think, a really important point.
Yeah, so I don't know how many know this book, When Helping Hurts, but as I've been out speaking and talking with people, I think like Brian's book and Toxic Charity, When Helping Hurts, I think they named this really important thing, but I was out there talking with churches and with people, the last 10 years, realizing what happened is they're awoken to, oh, this is important, like it's harder than we think to change, so much needs to be changed, and it's hard to change it well, and to use kingdom means for kingdom goals. But then I found there was this paralysis out there. And so I wrote this book really thinking, as an individual, I feel paralyzed sometimes. Then we look at these systems and feel paralyzed. And I thought, well, we're invited to fruitfulness and to change, but we're also invited just to faithfulness in another way. Yeah. And so if we think of it in terms of the work of justice as spiritual practices, then we can be free to say, well, I do what I'm called to do. I'm not called, everything must change maybe, but I can't change everything. And so what am I called to change? And then how can I do it in faithful ways and seeking fruitfulness? And for me, I find that really freeing when either one project or the world news can overwhelm. And I think these practices can offer a way for people to be freed into this work.
Absolutely. And that's what's great about your book, is it, and your talk today, it's like, we can do these things.
Yeah, absolutely.
We can do this. We can take the posture of confession. And I want to talk about the truthing, not truthiness.
Right.
A lot of truthiness going on in our public discourse. But truthing. So a really great thing happened in Wichita. I don't know if you know about this, but it did make national news. The chief of police, in the midst of all that's going on, came up with this idea to host a barbecue in the African American community. Right. And they sent out word, and the police force comes out, and the members of the African American community come out, and they did this amazing thing. They broke bread together. Right. And somehow in the midst of that, when you sit down with someone and break bread, it's like the 23rd Psalm, thou preparest the table in the presence of my enemies. Right. What's going on there? Because they're not going to be your enemies by the end of it, because you hear each other. Yeah. That's what you're talking about in truthiness? Or truthing. Don't get that one wrong. Not Colbert.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think that I got to sort of open a chapter talking about like love without truth is like a boat without a rudder. Just sort of drifting a bit aimlessly. But then truth without love just sort of sits there like an academic study and nothing happens. So it's when love and truth are working together that I think we work towards the justice of God's kingdom. So in that example then, like part of this, like seeking the truth and with respect is, then we can get to something. So what's happening and how, where's the misunderstanding and where are common points that we can work together? So I think that's a great example of seeking truth together.
Yeah, because I think the stereotypes exist when you, as long as you're separated.
Right.
But when you come together, you go, that's a real person who has these feelings, and this is what's going on.
And being on the ground, which is part of this truthing practice. And when we know people, and when we're walking through our neighborhoods and not just driving through them or getting to know our neighbors, that the truth, we know the truth better, and also the truth of other people's experience enters into us and helps us to love better.
Absolutely. You told several stories of generosity. And it made me think of something that Dr. Willard taught me, which is about kingdom economics. And that within the life of the kingdom, as we give, we don't actually lose it.
Right.
And that's very profound, isn't it? Because the thing is, I think, well, if I give to that, I have less now.
Yep.
But the reality is that you don't lose it.
Right.
And you've experienced that.
Yeah, exactly. I experienced it, and my daughter, that story I told my daughter, she sort of shows, many of us are born with that sort of kingdom economics and finding joy, and then we lose it, and it's hard when there's so many demands and someone misuses our gift or our money or whatever the case. But then for me, what's been so amazing is like the story I closed with, being on that bus in Haiti and to see kingdom economics happening with people who are literally living on the edge of survival. And if they're willing to live in that kind of love and faith, then I better be a little more generous in my life.
Exactly. That's so good. So I was visiting with Shane Claiborne, who does wonderful inner city work, and Shane actually spoke here on the stage a couple years ago. And we were talking about this phenomenon that a lot of people sort of see the romantic side of doing social justice.
Yep.
And you touched on that. Like, it feels good to me to go do it. And Shane, people read his books and they go, I'm going to go do that. And then they go to him and he said, and then they come and they don't understand what they're really going to be facing.
Yep.
And so he tries to sit them down and say, okay, here's what's going to happen.
Yep.
The person you're going to help get off drugs may go back.
Yep.
And somebody's going to throw up on you. Someone may throw a punch at you. And so he said, what I try to teach them is you need to be formed.
Yep.
There's a formation for mission that has to happen.
Yep.
Have you seen that?
For sure. I feel like in my own life, missions has been discipleship, and as I bring other people in, like seeing this as a process of discipleship. And Shane's great at that. He came down to Haiti with me once and was part of the work we were doing there too. And I think one example in one of the seminars I was in yesterday, I don't know if you're still here, but I think of a church receiving a Syrian refugee family. And I think that first welcome party is going to be fantastic, to think of the generosity you're pouring out for this family. And the first month of buying those first supplies, it was probably month 4 and month 15 and month 27 where, like the responsibilities of that love and culture and differences and getting a job and what have we gotten ourselves into. And so I think that's when these kind of spiritual practices for doing justice, like being honest up front and not just trying to get people fervent to get in and then not know what they're getting into is one part. And then seeing this as a discipleship where we're growing and we're in it for the long term is a really healthy way to stick with these kind of projects of justice.
Absolutely, and that's what you did so well, and I think Sung Chan did as well.
Right.
And Cindy Bunch, who's right up here, made the comment about Sung Chan's talk that it really felt like a nice blending of formation practices and doing justice.
Yep.
And sometimes those get disconnected.
Right.
And I think you do that really well as well. I mean, you couch what you're doing in these, you name them, practices.
Yep.
How come that's so important?
Yeah, I've just found I don't make it otherwise. Like I can't, and I think if I'm like sort of who we are is kind of ends up coming out in what we do. Like whether we're a pastor or a professor or a student. So thinking, well, God needs to shape us, and that affects my work. And then also if I'm doing some kind of work that demands something of me, I'm going to run out if it's not run out of gas. So that's the one part. Like I need the formation to make it in the places I've been. But I think, if it's prison ministry, whatever, we all need those practices to sustain us. And the second part is like just getting this insight that I think these spiritual formations help us to do the work better. And to me, that was just exciting to say, not only do I need this so that I don't get completely empty and compassion fatigue, but I'm gaining insights in how I can actually love my neighbor better. So let's keep bringing these together more and more.
That's wonderful. This is just so enriching, and I recommend you read this book, and I bless you in the work ahead of you. And let's keep in touch. What I love about what's happened is this is the 6th conference, and we've had different speakers, but it's like variations on a theme. We're all in the same story, telling it. And it's like a family is growing of people who can say, I know you, I met you, we're a part of something really fantastic, a great adventure.
Indeed.
Even if we end up in Emerald City.
Yes, indeed. Well, thank you.
Let's give thanks to Ken Annan.
Thank you all. Thank you, Jim.